What's up, guys? Welcome to the Resellers Podcast with Daily Refinement and Tech and Sports. Today, we're going to talk about a huge problem, maybe the biggest problem with resellers, which is when you're starting to resell, if you start making a bulk buy or you're just getting started, you have a bunch of different categories. So you have different piles. You have piles that need to be tested, piles that need to be cleaned. You have piles that are something you've never listed before, different categories, something you're not optimized for. You have items that are too big, and all of these items take up a lot of space and mental real estate. And it's a huge issue, and maybe it's the reason why you ultimately ended up selling clothing.
Yeah, totally. So like when I first started, I was just like everybody else. You kind of dabble in a lot of things to try to, maximize as much money as you can make with the time that you have available. So you would go to the flea market, go to the thrifts, pick up anything profitable. It didn't matter what it is, whether, board games, clothes, shoes, video games, blenders, it really didn't matter. Whatever made money, you pick it up. But then eventually you kind of evolve as a business and you kind of figure out the stuff that you want to deal with and the stuff that you don't want to deal with. And, like we always talk about, like the faster you can figure out what type of business you want to have and then build the business around that, the quicker you will be able to see success and maybe even long-term success.
And you are hyper focused, but you mentioned before the call, you even have items that you haven't finished testing.
Yeah. So when I used to go to the flea market, if they had Nintendo systems for $20, I would pick them up. If they had, electronics, I would pick them up. I know about all of those niches. I know how to make money in all of those niches. It's not a problem. But there comes a point where you buy a bunch of stuff, and whether it needs to be tested, whether it's missing a part or a piece, whether you need a special cable to be able to test it, then you have to box it up specially. You have to store it differently. And in the amount of time where it takes to like really and truly test a Nintendo or something, I could have taken pictures and listed 10 or 20 more items. So, you do the math and you say, okay, I bought this Nintendo for 20. Back then they were selling for 60. So like, I was only making maybe doubling my money after fees. I know Nintendo has gone up since then, but you double your money on the $20. Maybe it's a faster sale, but I could have taken a photo of 10 items and make $20 on each, and then that's $200 in the same amount of time. And I don't have to order parts. I don't have to wait for parts to show up. Don't have to cross my fingers that the person knows how to work, a 30-year-old gaming system when they get it. So for me, like it was a lot easier to just focus on what my business was built for, and a lot easier to say no to picking up those items and tie up a bunch of money in a pile in the corner that needs to be tested or is missing parts or pieces that need to be ordered.
So this is actually spurred from a question that we got from Mike. He's in the Facebook group, and he was messaging me saying he's a bike seller, and he ended up just selling bike parts instead of complete bikes because complete bikes have 1,000 components that could have a problem. And he would get the item not as described, and he was avoiding that at all costs. So he just switched to parts where he was just testing one component of the part. And then now he has like an entire area that's just a graveyard of items that are too big, don't match what he's not easily testable, missing one thing that he has to order, and he's trying to figure out how does he deal with this pile. And I have items that I pick up that seem like a good idea because they're profitable, and you hear that. What do you sell? And people say anything that's profitable, and then you think to yourself, "Ooh, that person probably doesn't do very well because anything that profitable means you're very inefficient."
Yeah, I do agree with that. Also, whenever you start to do this at any kind of scale, you need to start to consider and think about some sort of secondary outlet for items that are either not what you want to sell on eBay. Maybe you can't match those items up to the search algorithm because they don't have a strong brand, but they're still cool and maybe worth money. Or just stuff that is too risky to sell online. And you have to think of some sort of secondary outlet, whether it's, the flea market setting up there once a month or once a year or once a quarter, having a garage sale. For me, I have an entire brick and mortar store locally that I sell very cool clothes that maybe don't match up with the search algorithm and cannot be found. But to me, since I buy at bulk, they're still good enough to buy and turn a profit on. So for someone who has a lot of bike parts, you know, maybe those aren't fulfillable via eBay. So you have to consider some sort of secondary outlet whenever you start doing this at any kind of volume or scale, because not every single purchase may be truly maximized on eBay. And it's very difficult to just throw stuff away that you know you paid good money for. And with the amount that we pay for these items, they're still profitable even at a garage sale in front of your house. So like you can still make a profit and like get rid of these items liquidation price or break even at the very best. That is way better than just having a never ending pile of stuff that you can't deal with because maybe you can't sell it online.
And when you're purchasing lots, what happens is whoever you're buying the lot from has put every single kind of condition in that lot. So there is no uniformity, unfortunately. Some are going to work perfectly. Even if you buy store returns in clothing, if you're buying Nordstrom returns, they're going to include returns that are not even from Nordstrom's. That's how varied the inventory is when it comes in. You have to have a testing area to go through. Are the buttons working? Are the zippers working? There's quality control in every single category, and I think that it's impossible to know what those quality control items are on items that you've never heard of. There's horror stories of people buying um, 12 coffee makers, and then they get them, send it out, and all 12 customers report mold damage, and you didn't check. You didn't even know you were supposed to check for that. So those are the reasons why those were liquidated, because they were returned for mold. You didn't check inside the container. You have 12 angry customers. You could lose your account over 12 defects, no problem.
Yeah, totally. Like you said, even if you order from Nordstrom, Nordstrom has such a generous return policy. They might even take like Kmart brands, and that could end up inside of your Nordstrom pallet.
Hmm.
So, like, Costco takes anything back.
Hmm.
All of these places do sell via liquidation. So, you're going to have like some sort of like sifting process on different kinds of avenues for the items. So, like, if I did not have a brick and mortar store where I can sell stuff that to me has a different market than eBay, um, I would truly not be in the same position or maybe even be out of business because it would be impossible for me to buy at such large scale that I am and only get those particular items 100% of the time that are totally able to get sold on eBay. So I think like any well-rounded business needs to have a secondary avenue. Nordstrom has it with the liquidation.
Hmm.
We have it liquidating out front at the garage sale. Um, you have to have some sort of secondary market. Amazon has it with their return pallets. They monetize all of these things that are not sellable. And we have to be able to do the same thing. We have to be able to monetize every single piece of inventory that comes into our operation.
I 100% agree with that. Nordstrom also has Nordstrom Rack.
Right.
They've figured out ways to move discounted inventory, slow moving inventory. Having a discount process in your own store is also how you get rid of items in your own store that need to be liquidated and sent somewhere else. Do you have a policy where after 365 days they go to auction?
Yeah.
Because that's taking up space, and that is something I'm working on too. You have to have ways to liquidate your own inventory as well, even the ones you think qualified, the keepers.
Right. The two biggest things that can cripple you is going to be taking up too much space and then those items taking up too much money. If
Mm.
you have a space and all of your money is tied up into inventory, you cannot go out there and make new buys. And that's going to cripple your business because your cash flow is not going to be where it needs to be. And you won't be able to keep on sourcing because all of your money is going to be tied up into the inventory that is unsold. So, like you said, it's very important to have some sort of policy of sale or markdown, and then after that some sort of policy of moving on those items. um, so for me, I avoid the whole process of listing and taking down if it's no good, because I do have the brick and mortar store. Like, I don't want to put forth the work to list it, pay people to put it up, and then decide at a certain time that it's no good. It immediately gets put into two piles. The brick and mortar store, we could sell it over there, or this item is going to sell on eBay. And, since I've been doing this long enough, I know that all the items that I put on eBay eventually will sell. So there's not going to be thousands or hundreds of pieces of dead inventory that have no chance of selling on eBay, because you can find a very cool item, but if it doesn't match up with the search, it is impossible to sell. So with eBay, items that you choose to put on eBay need to have a strong brand or strong keywords that can be able to be found. Otherwise, those items need to be bought by someone who physically sees them and touches them and is able to pay you for them and take them home. And that's for every single thing. You can find, like, the bike guy, he can find a GT dyno and that's going to sell on eBay. Or he can have just a chrome frame, no brand, no nothing, and the only way that item is going to get found on eBay if someone searches Chrome frame. So
Mhm.
people may search that, but it's not as many search results as GT Dyno. So you have to figure out what avenue these items are going to go in. I think from the jump, you can't waste the time, waste the effort, waste the money, and list items that have a low chance of selling on eBay, because that's going to slow down your entire sell through rate of your store, may increase the bounce rate that we talk about, and that
Mhm.
could have like a ripple effect across your entire store. And eBay may, limit the views, limit the impressions, because you have a bunch of items that may never sell on eBay because they're not strong enough items to sell on eBay.
This is, a really good conversation because these are, somebody in the group this morning called them projects. You have a project of this item that, um, could be good enough if you altered it. That can also happen. Somebody will get, maybe it's a Gucci item, but the zipper's broken. So that wouldn't sell normally, but if you put the effort in, um, fix the zipper, maybe it would be worth money. These projects, Robin in the group mentioned when she does one of these projects, she's done for the day.
Right. Totally. And for me, I don't care if it's Gucci or not. If it's a project, I probably shouldn't get it.
Yeah.
Like, I should choose not to buy that item, because the number one thing that we run into with everybody that we talk to is there's not enough time in the day just to even get your own listings up. So there's not extra time in the day for you to become a seamstress and put on new zippers and replace buttons and fix holes. There's not enough time in the day where it's
Mm-mm.
such a struggle to even just do the basics. So don't even buy those items, because even if they are profitable, they are not profitable by the time you factor in how much time is going to take for you to fix it, how much energy you have to put in, and what you could have gotten done during that time, which would have made you more money. So, it can be hard because, like you said, it might be something crazy like a Gucci thing that may be $800.
Mm-mm.
But like, after you sit there and you do all the work, like, I could have sold $800 already worth of other stuff that I didn't have to think about or put in that extra time dedicated to do. So for me, I would choose not to buy those items and just stay the course, because there is no shortage of sellable items right off the racks. There's no shortage of that.
The more premium the item is, the more clout, as you call it, would social media would give you for finding that item. It's actually more distracting. When I found those Apple shoes, I drove to Apple headquarters and wasted a whole day to see if I could find someone that actually knew something about them. Finally found somebody. They scheduled a call and they're like, "Oh yeah, they gave those to employees in the, when we first started. That's where that's from." Okay, great. Now I still have to find a buyer. Wasted another day calling an auction house. They're like, okay, well, you need to send it to another place to get it authenticated, blah, blah, blah. And in the end, I ended up selling them because I'm like, I don't want to waste any more time dealing with these. And you'll see that people find a marquee piece. And you mentioned that in your brick and mortar. If you put in a whole bunch of premium stuff, all the employees need to look, they need to take pictures on Instagram. It's distracting selling one off home runs that you can't replace.
Yeah, man, it's very, very distracting. For me, like, I think what's even more, maybe even a crutch, and I don't believe in doing this at all, but some people do believe in doing this, is after you go thrifting all day, list the best stuff first, because like you're motivated to list it. I believe in probably doing the opposite. List the worst stuff first, because if all you're doing is listing the best stuff, and that's like its own pile is best stuff, you're always going to have that pile of stuff that's not as good, and you'll never be motivated to list it because you're only like a best stuff lister. And that regular stuff is only going to tie up your money and become an even bigger pile week after week, because that type of person has to go back on the route and find those best stuff again. They're never going to touch that stuff that wasn't worthy of immediately and running home and listing. So everything that I get, whether it's $1,000 shirt or a shirt that I'm going to sell for $9.99, it goes in the queue. When I get
Hmm.
to it, I get to it. There's heavy hitters in the queue right now that I'm going to see in a couple of weeks, and I will get to it when I get to it. If I was only focused on listing the best of the best, I would have no motivation or desire of listing the regular stuff. And I would always be on the search of finding more best of the best, because that's the kind of stuff that I want to list. So, like, everything to me just needs to be one pile, one queue, and you need to work through it and you need to go through it. Once you start subdividing and making decisions on what you want to list and don't want to list, that's when you run into trouble, because you're always going to default into that I want to list pile, and you're never going to touch the pile that you don't want to list.
This is important because another category that popped up was people said items that are too big, items that are not your category, items that are dirty. And then also, maybe the most ignored category is good items with a lower ASP. So these
Yeah,
would sell,
yeah,
but they're not exciting.
not exciting, man. But I'll tell you this, my life is pretty exciting selling not exciting things every single day, 365 days a year. Because
Yeah,
everything else is a distraction, man. Total distraction selling everything else but non exciting things.
I
And
agree with
nobody
that.
wants to hear that. No one wants to hear that.
No, because they want to sell the one off.
Right. Like Walmart's doing okay, like selling toilet paper every day. Like that's not anything exciting to talk about, but they're doing just fine. So like to me, I'm excited to list not exciting things. And maybe that's why I was able to get to the point that I'm at, because none of this stuff excites me. So I'm more than happy to list it.
That's a great mentality. If you do have things, and here's the thing, most people probably do have items that are in their category that they're not listing because it's not exciting. And you need
Yeah,
to, and so like, if the bike guy has a process to test every single kind of part, and he just doesn't like testing certain parts, so that it goes into that pile and then it doesn't get tested, even though he has a process already. Um, if it was treated the same, all bike parts that move through the system go through the same reconditioning process, then those piles would be reduced. That's one way of reducing it, is treating every item the same.
totally, man. So every single item in my process is treated the same. So, sometimes, people talk about that they like to batch stuff and only list 20 shirts in a row. Then they'll
Mm,
list 20 pants in a row. Then they'll list, 10 shorts in a row. And that's fine if you could do it. But for me, every single thing goes through the process in the order that it's in the queue. And that's it. Because imagine if I had one employee that says, I just don't like to list pants. And they always put pants to the side, because pants for us is a total extra step because it requires additional measurements.
mhm.
So like if I was taking photos, I would prefer not to do pants and I would prefer to do shirts. Shirts are much easier. But if one of the photographers said, I don't like to do pants and just always put those to the side, at the end of the week, I would have a mountain of pants that were not dealt with. And how do I deal with those pants other than when they come in the queue, we do them? That's it. When overalls come in the queue, we do them. I understand it's different. I understand maybe it may be more difficult due to more measurements and different kind of photos. But when it comes through the queue, we do it. Otherwise, you have a whole stack of overalls and pants and maybe tracksuits that never get dealt with. So as it comes, that's when we do it. If we subdivided, that alone is a whole nother step and takes a whole lot of time. but it gives you the opportunity to pick and choose what's easier. That's really what it boils down to. People are always going to default to what's easier. And if I was an employee and if I could tell my boss that I only want to do this because it's easier, maybe that would be okay for some people, but that's not how we operate here, and I don't think that's how the real world operates. And if you always default to what's easier, you're always going to have that pile of stuff that is unlisted, tying up your money and tying up your space.
Also, each time your process changes hands, there's more defects. If it's like you have, okay, these things have to go through that person before they can be listed. Now you have a bottleneck. So I remember at Starbucks, I asked them one time, what do you do when somebody orders 20 coffees? How does that screw up your whole? They're like, well, what happens is we assign one person to do all 20 coffees. Otherwise, it's impossible for us to all try to do a bulk order. It screws up the whole. There's only one person can process one order at a time, and that's how they were able to um, reduce the mistakes on that. And I think that's one way to think of it. And it's like if somebody orders a latte, you can't say go to a different line and we'll process it over there with somebody different. It's just got to go through the same system. Everything goes through the same way. I think that's
Yeah,
yeah.
everything has to go through the same system. And I'm a big believer in redundancy. So like if someone doesn't come, everyone else is capable to do whatever that person was supposed to do that day. Um, I was watching an interview the other day with the CEO of Raising Cane's. It's a chicken restaurant. We don't have any of them around here, I don't think. But embroidered on their shirt, it says fries, line, and cashier. So embedded in the training is we do everything. There's not just a cashier here. There's not just a guy who does fries here. There's not just a guy who does the line. Embedded on their shirt, it tells everybody that we do everything. We do pants, we do shirts, we do jackets. There's no picking and choosing what you want to do. The process is fries, line, and cook. That's what we do. So if everyone is trained to do that, or if you're trained to do everything, then you have to hold yourself to that same accountability of I'm doing fries, I'm doing hamburgers, and I'm running the cashier. And you don't get to pick and choose. When you come, you do everything, and that's what you do. Because whenever you start separating, it's super easy to default into the easy stuff.
That's right. It's the exceptions. Oh, sometimes I don't do it this way. But if you just did it the same way every time, you list every item that you buy within 24 hours, that probably if you just did that one thing, you
Yeah,
personally listed every single item you found within 24 hours, you would naturally not pick up things that you couldn't list in 24 hours.
totally. Yep. If that was your policy and embroidered on your shirt that I list everything I find within 24 hours, you would not pick up a big wheel because you cannot list that in 24 hours.
Yep.
And for the longest time, that was my policy of listing everything that I found that day, same day within 24 hours. That was my policy.
Now, I want to caution people again, and I'm going to be talking about this a lot upcoming, which is it's always tempting to outsource in the beginning because you think you can get more listings up. But I can't reiterate this enough. The longer that you can list items yourself, you will make more money in the long run because you'll understand how eBay works. People were asking for a high level call. A high level call would be you really focusing on what is the best title, what are the best photos, what are the best descriptions in your category. That's very focused work that if you outsource, you wouldn't learn that high level stuff, which is what separates you from the 1 billion listings on eBay. You have to be really good at what you do or you can't stand out.
Yeah. So, like, I've outsourced a lot of stuff in the business by now once I got the processes streamlined and was able to fill in people and still maintain the same quality that I'm looking for. Photos, drafts, the shipping process. The thing that I will probably never outsource, I will never hire somebody to be the actual person that presses the blue button that says list. I will probably list every single item that goes through the store, because if there is a mistake, I'm the one that needs to catch it. If there is a keyword that needs to be put in there, I'm probably the best trained one to do it. And it would take an extremely long time to train somebody, all the keywords and the different brands, the different niches, etc. And at the end of the day, if there is something that goes up incorrectly, that needs to fall on me. That cannot be the responsibility of the entire business placed on somebody who is not me. So if you put up incorrect listings, your return rate is going to go through the roof. Your items may not sell. Your store could sink. You can totally change the course of your business if your listings are not to the best of your ability to put up. And to put that pressure on somebody else outside of me, I think that is unfair to that person coming from me, because I do require pretty close to perfection. And I think that if somebody had a bad day, they could totally screw up the course of your store. So I think the absolute last thing, and maybe never ever to be outsourced, is the person who actually pushes the blue button to list the item from the draft that the employees make. Everything else, if your processes are clean enough, you can hire in time, in the right time. And I believe, like you, wait as long as humanly possible before you make your first hires. I even would recommend to overweight. The better off you'll be in the long run, and the more money you'll make in the long run.
That is so counterintuitive because the initial thing is like just hire as many people as you can afford to and scale as fast as possible. Sounds like a way to make a lot more money. But from my experience, it's you land kind of like where you started. You're like no better off than where you started, except for now you have an account with negative feedback and defects, and your reputation is damaged, and then you let things slip. Now your default is you let a few things slip through the cracks. That's your default because it's not even like 100. When you give somebody else the ability to be blamed, it's almost like that's the default. You sort of take the accountability off of yourself when you do that, and that erodes other parts of your business is not taking full responsibility.
Right. So our businesses are totally different from each other. You have people building the listings,
Hmm.
and then you have people building the drafts. But
Hmm.
our business is still the same. You're the one that pushes the blue button. So if you're listing incorrect items, that's on you. That's your fault. You're the one that listed those. If your describer was the one pressing the blue button and they make mistakes, that's still your fault at the end of the day. So you
Yep.
may as well be the one that pushes the blue button anyways.
This is back to your analogy of baseball. The point of contact is the
It's the
list button.
same. Yeah, it's the
Yep.
same.
It's the list
Some
button.
people have an open stance, closed stance, hands up, hands low. The point of contact is always the same, no matter what the position. So if you're still ultimately responsible, you may as well just be the person that presses the blue button anyways.
So going back to the having a bunch of items that don't really match, people have suggested doing like a Pomodoro method where they focus for 20 minutes and so they can get started. But I think that something that you do that is something that people can learn from is when you are in that grind mode where you're getting through maybe a few items that you don't want to list, but you list anyway, your focus level is really, really high because it's not hard to focus on listing a $300 item. You're into it. Your interest level is high. You're excited. You've already spent that $300. You're into it. That $20 item though, you're probably not excited. You've got to really dial in that focus because that's the money part because there's unlimited $20 items.
Yeah, so the amount of focus that it takes to list 250 items and have a return rate under 1.5%, there's a lot of things that I have to make sure are correct. Item specifics filled out to the best of their ability, correct titles. I have to change things in listings from time to time. And if I don't make those changes, my return rate could easily double. And then I'm at 3%. And around 3%, you're at that point where, your final value fee can go up 5%. And my final value fee going up 5% would be like an extra almost $10,000 per month. And like that's a whole nother business right there, where I have to pay an extra $10,000 per month on final value fees. So for me, I have to be laser focused to make sure that the listings that are put up are 100% accurately described and presented to the customer in the best possible way that we could present them.
That concludes the free section of our podcast. If you'd like to continue listening, please sign up at patreon.com/the Resellers Podcast.